All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving deep, as we always do, into magnetometer sensors.
Okay.
Now, that might sound like, that's pretty technical. But I think if you stick with us here, you'll find that this is a surprisingly relevant topic, especially if you're someone who's interested in kind of the underlying technologies that influence everything from smartphones to self-driving cars and
Yeah.
just kind of the overall trajectory of, where tech is headed.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And for this deep dive, we have a really, really solid report, very comprehensive, full of good information.
Yeah.
It's the Magnetometer Sensor Market Report 2025 Global Edition by Cognitive Market Research.
Awesome, awesome, great source.
It's a good one.
So what we're going to be trying to do today is extract, I guess, the key takeaways from this for you so you can sound like a, like a real expert at your next cocktail party or, wherever you're hanging out.
Yeah.
And that would include things like, the overall size of the magnetometer sensor market in 2025, the anticipated growth in the coming years.
Right.
And really kind of understanding why this seemingly kind of niche area is actually really quite significant.
Yeah, it's pretty important, actually.
It's, we're going to uncover some surprising facts and really kind of delve into which sectors are really poised for some huge expansion.
All right, let's do it.
All right, let's jump in.
So to start off with the big picture here, the report projects that the global magnetometer sensor market is going to hit 4,280 million USD in 2025.
Okay, so that's a big number to start off with.
Yeah.
But this is where it gets even more interesting because the report is really suggesting that there's a pretty substantial leap coming from that point onward.
Yeah, big jump, They are projecting a compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, of 7.9% between 2025 and 2033.
Okay.
Now, CAGR is not just like your simple year-on-year increase. It's actually taking into account how the growth compounds on itself over time, kind of like how you would think about compound interest.
Right.
So if their projection is accurate, the market's going to balloon to 700 and 863.49 million USD by 2033. Yeah, it's a big jump.
So what is it? I mean, what are the things that are driving this impressive expansion? I mean, surely it's not just one factor.
No, definitely not. It's multifaceted.
Right.
The report highlights several key areas that are contributing to this.
Yes.
First of all, you got the growing demand from consumer electronics, which is a huge sector, and it's only getting bigger. And then you have the automotive industry, which is constantly evolving, lots of innovation happening there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have progress in aerospace. And then we can't forget the increasing integration of the Internet of Things. IoT, where everyday objects are all connected.
Yeah.
And all of these things rely heavily on these sensors. And last but not least, you've got the ongoing trend of automation in industrial processes.
Right.
All of these are really major factors driving the market.
So it's like the perfect storm in a good way.
It is.
For this particular market.
It is, yeah.
So just so we can get our timeline straight here.
Yeah.
The report mentions a few specific years.
Yeah, so the base year they used for their calculations is 2024.
Okay.
And they analyzed data from 2021 to 2024. 2025 is their estimated current year, and then they're projecting all the way out to 2033.
Got it. Okay, so that gives us a good global overview.
Yeah.
Let's zoom in a little bit on different parts of the world
Right.
and talk about how the market breaks down, geographically.
Yeah, so if we look at the regions, North America is currently the largest player, holding over 40% of the market.
Yeah.
Their market size in 2025 is estimated to be 1,583.6 million USD, and they have a projected CGR of 6.4% through 2033.
Okay, and within North America, are there particular countries that are kind of leading the charge?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The U.S. market is the biggest piece of that, estimated at 1,249.46 million USD in 2025, with a 6.2% CAGR.
Okay.
And the reports indicating that technology and defense are the main drivers there.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then you have Canada, which is also pretty significant.
Yeah.
At 190.03 million USD in 2025, and a slightly higher CGR of 7.2%. And they're being fueled by, advancements in technology, research, and innovation.
Yeah.
And then you have Mexico's market, which is around 144.11 million with a 6.9% CAGR. So overall, the growth in North America is really closely tied to the advancement of technology in that region.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Just general progress.
All right, so interesting to see those little nuances within North America.
Yeah.
How about across the pond? Let's talk about Europe.
All right, so Europe also holds a pretty substantial chunk of the global market, over 30%.
Wow.
Their estimated market size in 2025 is 1,241.2 million USD, and they're projecting a CAGR of 6.9% through 2033.
Okay. And within Europe, are there any, are there specific countries that are really leading the way there?
Yeah, the UK is definitely one to watch.
Okay.
They have a market size of 208.52 million USD in 2025 and a really solid 7.7% CAGR.
Okay.
They're driven by both innovation and market demand.
Mm,
And then you have Germany right behind them with a 245.76 million USD market and a 7.1% CAGR, also propelled by innovation and demand.
okay.
And then Russia is also significant at 192.39 million, although they have a slightly lower CGR of 5.9%. But across the board, in Europe, the report really emphasizes that the need for these advanced sensing technologies across different industries is what's pushing their market forward.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch gears and go to the other side of the world.
Okay.
Let's talk about Asia Pacific, APAC.
Right?
That's a region where we often hear about, really significant growth rates.
Oh, yeah.
How does that play out here?
Yeah, it's definitely the case here, too. APAC currently holds about 23% of the global market,
Okay.
with a size of 127.2 million USD in 2025. But the thing that really stands out is their projected CAGR,
Okay.
10.6% from 2025 to 2033.
Wow, so over 10%.
That's the highest of any region we're looking at.
That's huge. That's a really big number.
It is, it's big growth.
So which countries within APAC are kind of contributing the most to that pretty rapid expansion?
Yeah, so China is a major player there.
Okay.
Their market size in 2025 is 431.42 million USD with a 10.1% CAGR. And they're being driven by, their huge manufacturing sector and the constant technological innovation happening there.
Right. Yeah.
And then India is another key growth market, starting at 102.72 million in 2025,
Okay.
but with a massive 12.5% CAGR.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's impressive. And then South Korea, they have a 123.26 million USD market and a 9.7% CAGR, driven by advancements in tech and their really strong industrial demand.
Yeah. So the overarching theme in APAC really is the rapid technological advancement and the increasing adoption of these sensors across a lot of different applications.
Yeah, so it seems like the sheer volume of manufacturing in APAC,
Right.
coupled with this strong push for tech advancements,
Yep.
it's fueling this growth.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So it sounds like while North America and Europe are the big players right now,
APAC is definitely on a fast track to catch up.
for sure.
So what about some of the other regions in the world?
Right.
South America, the Middle East, Africa.
Yeah, so South America, smaller market, but still growing. They're over 5% of the global revenue. Their market size in 2025 is projected to be 162.64 million USD,
Okay.
with an 8.6% CAGR to 2033. The main countries to watch there are Brazil, with a 69.61 million USD market and a 9.2% CAGR,
Okay.
and Argentina with 27.32 million and a 9.5% COGR. And their growth is really being driven by, just the general technological advancements. The report also specifically points to the demand in sectors like aerospace, defense, automotive, and even mining.
Interesting. Okay. And what about the Middle East?
Okay, so the Middle East has a market share of around 2%, estimated at 171.2 million USD in 2025, with a CAGR of 9.2% through 2033. And the key players there are Saudi Arabia, with a 60.26 million USD market and a 9.5% CAGR, and the UAE with 35.27 million and a 9.7% CAGR. The demand there is driven by industries like oil and gas, mining, and defense.
Makes sense. Okay. And then finally, what about the market in Africa?
So Africa currently has the smallest market share, around 1%, with a projected size of 94.16 million USD in 2025 and a KGR of 8.2% to 2033.
Okay.
South Africa and Nigeria are the main markets there.
Yeah.
South Africa is at 33.14 million with a 9.1% CAGR.
Okay.
And Nigeria is smaller at 7.53 million, but they have a solid 8.4% CAGR. And the growth in Africa is being linked to an increasing demand for geological surveys and resource exploration, as well as just general expansion of industrial applications and the adoption of technology, especially in Nigeria.
Right. Okay. So that's a really comprehensive view of
Yeah.
all the different regional dynamics.
For sure.
Let's talk about some of the different types and applications of these sensors now?
All right.
Because the report indicates that some segments are expanding, faster than others.
Yes, definitely. So overall, the category of three-axis magnetometers
Okay.
is the fastest growing segment within the entire magnetometer sensor industry.
Three-axis, so that means they can measure.
Yeah, so three-axis means they can measure magnetic fields in 3 dimensions,
Got it.
not just one direction. They give you a much fuller picture.
So it's not just, up and down.
Look.
It's like all three.
It's like, yeah, like an X, Y, and Z axis,
Got it. Okay.
gives you a three-dimensional understanding.
All right.
And within that three-axis category,
Okay.
the report specifically highlights vector magnetometers
Okay.
as driving this really rapid growth.
So vector, what does vector mean in this context?
Yeah, so vector means it's not just measuring the strength of the magnetic field.
Okay.
It's also measuring the direction of that magnetic field. So it's giving you like a vector of that force.
Right.
So you're getting a much more complete picture.
Got it.
And this directional information is super important
Right.
for things like mineral exploration, geophysical research, military navigation.
Right.
All these areas where you need to know like the precise 3D awareness of the magnetic field.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for those I guess specialized fields.
Yeah,
Where you really need to know the orientation of the magnetic field.
absolutely.
How about in terms of technology? Are there certain types of magnetometer technology that are being adopted more rapidly?
Yeah, the report highlights the Overhauser effect as a key driver in rapid market growth.
Overhauser effect.
The Overhauser effect.
Okay.
Yeah, and this technology is all about enhanced sensitivity and precision when it comes to detecting even very weak magnetic fields.
Okay.
It's like having a more finely tuned antenna that can pick up even the faintest of signals.
Right.
And because of this sensitivity, Overhauser magnetometers are finding increasing use in areas like mineral exploration, oil and gas prospecting, geophysical surveying, all these areas where you need to be able to pick up these subtle magnetic anomalies.
Interesting. Okay, so it sounds like, greater sensitivity
Yeah.
is really a major factor in driving growth for certain applications.
Yes.
How about the strength of the magnetic fields,
Okay.
that they're designed to measure? Does that also play a role in which segments are growing the fastest?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
The report points to the medium magnetic field range, specifically 10 Gauss to 50 Gauss as a rapidly expanding segment. And to give you a sense of scale,
Okay.
the Earth's magnetic field is around 0.5 Gauss.
Okay.
So this is significantly stronger than that.
Okay.
And this range offers a good balance of sensitivity and the ability to filter out noise, making it really suitable for a bunch of different applications in automotive, healthcare, environmental monitoring.
Okay. So earlier we touched on three-axis sensors as being, a fast-growing product type. What about dual-axis sensors? Are they also seeing significant growth?
They are. They're experiencing very rapid growth.
Okay.
And that's because they can provide high-precision measurements in 2 directions at the same time,
Okay.
which makes them super useful for things like automotive safety systems, aerospace navigation and control, and even consumer electronics, like the navigation and compass functionalities in our smartphones.
Right. Okay. And then finally, when we're looking at the industries that are actually using these sensors, so the end-use industries,
Yeah,
is there one that stands out in terms of rapid growth?
definitely. Aerospace and defense is driving the fastest growth.
Okay.
And this is because of the increasing sophistication of things like navigation systems, drone technology, even space exploration.
Right. So it's not just about, more planes and ships.
No, it's about the technology that's going into them. It's about accurate positioning for autonomous vehicles or the kind of detailed mapping needed for things like satellite deployment.
Right. So those are the areas that are experiencing, the most rapid growth.
Yeah.
What about the segments that currently hold the largest share of the market?
All right. So in terms of measurement type,
Okay.
scalar magnetometers currently dominate.
Okay. So they're the big ones right now.
Yeah, they're the big players. And that's because of their really high precision in measuring the magnitude or the strength of a magnetic field, no matter which direction it's coming from.
Okay. And what about the dominant technology?
So for technology, proton precession magnetometers are the leading type. And their dominance comes from their high accuracy and reliability, and their ability to measure both the strength and the direction of those fields.
Okay.
That's what makes them really popular for things like geophysical surveys and environmental monitoring.
Got it. Okay. And then what about sensitive range? Are there any specific ranges that dominate there?
Yeah, so low magnetic field magnetometers,
Mm.
which are those that can measure from less than 1 milligauss up to 10 gauss, those dominate the market.
Yeah.
And that's because they're used in so many different fields like geology, archaeology, mineral exploration,
Yeah.
but also in consumer electronics and navigation systems.
Got it. What about product type?
Mhm.
Single axis versus multi-axis sensors.
Right. So currently, single axis magnetometers
Okay.
are the dominant type. And that's because they're cost effective and pretty simple to make. And they're used across a lot of different industries, from consumer electronics to automotive and industrial sectors.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then finally, which end-use industry currently kind of consumes the largest quantity of these sensors?
So the automotive sector is the dominant player in that. And it's because of things like autonomous driving systems and advanced driver assistance systems, or ADS,
Right.
that are being increasingly integrated into vehicles.
Yeah.
And these systems really rely on magnetometers for a variety of things, like wheel speed sensing, electronic stability control.
Got it. So interesting to see that while, aerospace and defense is
Mm.
growing the fastest, automotive is still the biggest user right now.
Absolutely.
The report likely also touches on the factors that are fueling all this activity,
Yeah.
and then also any potential challenges or limitations.
It does. So on the plus side,
Mhm.
there are constant efforts to make these sensors more accurate and smaller.
Right.
Miniaturization is a big trend.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the growing demand from consumer electronics, smartphones, wearables, all of that is fueling growth.
Yeah.
And the automotive industry is finding more and more applications for these sensors.
Right. Right.
But there are some hurdles.
Okay.
The report mentions high production costs as a potential limiting factor,
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
especially for those price-sensitive industries.
Yeah.
And the calibration requirements for these sensors can sometimes be complex, which can make it hard to guarantee accuracy in the real world.
Right.
And it can also mean increased maintenance costs.
Okay. Those are definitely important aspects to consider.
Yeah.
Are there any key trends that are expected to shape the future of this market?
Yeah, there are a couple that really stand out.
Okay.
So firstly, the development of smaller multi-sensor solutions. So like combining a magnetometer with other types of sensors
Yeah.
into a single unit.
Right.
So you're getting more data
Right.
in a smaller package.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, there's a constant push to improve sensitivity. So we're talking about detecting even fainter magnetic fields
Right.
while also trying to make production more cost-effective.
So it sounds like the ideal scenario
Yeah.
is better performance
Yeah.
at a lower cost.
That's the goal.
Right. Okay. I think the report also gives us some insight into some of the key players in this space.
It does. It does.
So who are the big players in this market?
So you have a mix of established players and newer companies. So
Yeah.
some of the big names you'll see are Honeywell, Analog Devices, NXP Semiconductors.
Okay.
Those are the
Yeah.
big guys.
Yeah.
And they're heavily invested in R&D, constantly trying to innovate. But then you have some smaller companies coming up as well.
Okay.
They're often focused on more niche applications or trying to find ways to make production cheaper.
Right. Right.
But overall, the focus is on making sensors that are small, accurate, and energy efficient.
That seems to be the trend.
It is, yeah.
I think the report even gave a specific example
It
of
did.
recent innovation. Do you remember that?
Yeah, they highlighted Asahi Kasei Corporation
Hmm.
and their ultra-compact package latch-type Hall IC called the AK8781.
Okay.
And this was introduced back in June 2020. Now, a Hall IC uses the Hall effect to detect magnetic fields.
Okay.
This particular one was designed for small DC brushless motors.
Mhm.
And the report mentioned its compact size, its quick response time, and its ability to handle high temperatures.
Okay.
So innovations like this are helping to make DC brushless motors,
Oh.
which are used in everything from drones to household appliances,
Right.
smaller and more efficient.
So it's really like a concrete example
Yeah,
of the kinds of things happening in this field.
that is, yeah.
All right. So as we wrap up this deep dive today,
Mhm.
what would you say are the most important takeaways for our listeners?
All right, so the key things to remember here are that there is a lot of growth projected for this market.
Okay.
It's going to be big. And also, we talked about how North America and Europe are the largest markets currently.
Yeah.
But Asia Pacific is the one that's growing the fastest. So
Right.
that's something to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
We also talked about how, the more sophisticated sensors like 3-axis and dual-axis are becoming more and more important
Yeah.
because of their capabilities.
Right.
The automotive sector is the biggest end user right now,
Mm.
but aerospace and defense is the fastest growing. And then the other thing to remember is that miniaturization and accuracy and cost effectiveness
Ah,
are really what's shaping this market.
got it. Okay.
Those are the key takeaways.
So I think it's important to point out, too, that, understanding all these dynamics,
Yeah.
it isn't just relevant for people who are, directly involved in the tech industry.
No, definitely not.
It's valuable insight into how technology is progressing across so many different sectors,
Yeah.
things that affect all of us.
Yeah, it affects our daily lives.
So whether you're, preparing for a meeting or just trying to be informed about emerging trends, or even if you're just curious about the technology that's kind of behind so much of our world, um, this is valuable information.
It is.
And it illustrates just how important these components are, even though we don't always see them.
Yeah, they're often hidden, but they're there.
And the areas of high growth, both geographically
Yeah.
and by application,
Mm,
they really point to where we can expect to see, future opportunities.
absolutely. Yeah, so as you go about your day, I want you to think about this.
Yeah.
Our society is becoming more and more reliant on devices that need to be aware of their environment. And that means that these sensors, these magnetometer sensors,
Yeah.
are going to play a bigger and bigger role in our lives.
Even though we don't always see them.
Exactly, even though we don't see them. So it makes you wonder what other technologies are out there right now evolving that are going to shape the future
Yeah.
in ways that we might not even be aware of yet.
Right.
So it's something to think about.
Food for thought.
Definitely.
All right. That's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
See you later.